everybody and welcome to the Flute Practice. Today we are going to be looking at how to play on an open hold flute. Now before I dive into some really practical tips on how you can get used to adjusting to a flute like this, I just want to kind of go into a few of the reasons why we play on open hold flutes, or why some people think open hold flutes are better than closed hold flutes. I'm going to preface this by saying this is a debate, and there are some people that swear by closed hold flutes, and that is totally fine. Like, I am not trying to convince you one way or another. So the first really big reason why the open hold flute is so great is it does force your fingers and your hands to get into a good position. You cannot get away with kind of having your fingers half on the keys or doing this kind of dinosaur claw thing that we so often see. You can't get away with as much as you can with the open hold flute. I'm not saying it's like the only way you're going to get a good hand position, and I'm not even saying that it's necessarily going to give you a good hand position, but it does help. The other really cool thing about the open hold flute is that you can do really cool kind of extended techniques and effects like these slides, where you're kind of lifting and opening the key. You get that kind of sliding glissando kind of feel on the note. That is definitely something that you do need an open hold flute for, and there's some other techniques that you will need open holds. I'd say the biggest reason for the open hold flute is that it's kind of become like a standard convention that most professional level flutes have open holes. So if you're wanting to buy a nice kind of really professional level instrument, chances are you're going to have to buy an open hold instrument. You can apparently get them custom made closed hold, or there might be a couple floating around, but generally you are going to need to contend with this guy sooner or later. Maybe you've just bought a nice new flute and you've still got those nice silicone plugs in that often come with open hold flute in the beginning. I don't have them because I've been playing this guy for better part of 10 years. And to be totally honest with you, I lost those plugs in like the first week after taking them out. Not particularly good at not losing stuff. If you have got all those plugs in, there are essentially two options you've got, and there is a lot of debate as to which of these two options you should take. The first one is to kind of go cold turkey, like take those plugs out, rip off that plaster and just go all out. This is a really great solution if you've got time. If you haven't got any big stuff coming up like concerts or auditions, even big lessons or repertoire that you need to learn. If you've got time to be patient, if you've got time to take about 10 steps backwards, then take all your plugs out, go for it. You are going to get there a lot faster. Like, you are going to adjust much quicker than if you're taking them out one at a time. That I can pretty much promise you, with some rare exceptions. If, however, you are like the rest of the world and you have got stuff coming up and you've got auditions or concerts or whatever it might be, even just rehearsals or lessons, you might want to do the slow approach, which is taking out 1 or 2 plugs at a time. Best plugs to take out first, I'd say, is the A key plug there and this F plug over here. These guys, I find, the hand can quite quickly adjust to those 2 plugs out. You're going to need to be patient in the beginning because your fingers are going to have to learn to really cover those holes, especially if they haven't been covering those holes. So a bit of patience is required nonetheless. The next plug that's great to take out is the E. Also relatively still simple and easy plug to take out. And then you're going to tackle these 2 ring fingers here and take these guys out. They are definitely the most challenging, and I'm going to get to some tips on how to deal with this in a moment. All right, so let's assume you've either taken out all of your plugs or you kind of working towards that. How can you really best adapt to this new kind of setup? The first thing I'm really going to just reiterate here, I've mentioned it, is we need to work on your hand position. If you're struggling to close the holes, it's usually because something weird is happening with your hands and you're not actually developing a nice, relaxed, loose, free, and rounded hand position. And my golden rule with hand position is trying to keep everything as round and natural as possible. Okay, so in this hand, I really like to think of almost cuddling in. I imagine there's like a little ball in the hand and I'm really cuddling into those keys. Especially for this ring finger. So if your ring finger is kind of coming out straight like that, and you're just managing to touch the key, you can see he kind of almost like angles up there a little bit when I keep him straight. Whereas if I think round and from above, he's very easily able to reach that key and cover it very nicely. And the big thing here for me is this wrist. is releasing this wrist, that he's not kind of locked in a straight position or even locked in a bent position or anything, but that he's just totally free. The other hand, the same thing. We really want to have those fingers at nice kind of gentle curves, not too straight, but also not too bent. And I'm going to explain this in a moment, why this is also dangerous. We want to make sure that the fingers are kind of approaching the flute at the same angle, that they're not kind of like pronating up like that. To me, this sometimes even feels like I'm a little bit more over to this side. And this brings me to a really important kind of like extra tip about this finger. The big thing that I had to realize and learn was that it doesn't have to be in the middle of the finger, but that it can actually be a little bit off to the side. And that's generally how my hand kind of lands, where this finger is tapping that key a little bit off to the side. And you know what? It still covers that hole very well. Now, although we want to think round with all of our fingers, definitely important, we don't want to think too much on the tips. And this is my next really important point, which is you want to think a little bit flatter on the tips of those fingers. So you want to think a little bit more on that kind of like padded, fleshy bit of the finger, rather than on the tippy tip of the finger. Just because there's kind of a little bit more padding and skin there, so it's easier to kind of cover those holes. And also you have kind of like a bigger like margin of error because you have the finger a little bit more over the key rather than like in the key, where you've got to be like super duper precise. And this is just not a very natural way to tap the fingers anyway. So if you are doing this, just release those fingers and allow them to find natural curves. Going along with this, and often what we do is we're kind of not covering the holes properly, so we squeeze tighter. So we kind of there, and then we like kind of buckle down. Now, I always say this, you're either covering the hole or you're not covering the hole. And yes, maybe squeezing might kind of force the fingers a little bit more into the holes, but to be totally honest with you, if you're not covering, you're not covering. And squeezing harder is not going to make it cover. In fact, sometimes squeezing will even lift the fingers away from the holes. So sometimes, for example, you squeeze and you actually start lifting, or tension, when you're building up tension, especially in this hand, you're kind of building up tension, and this finger, as we mentioned earlier, starts to actually lift. So you want to also keep those fingers really relaxed. Yes, you want to kind of let them plug those holes nicely, and you can kind of feel it when it's there. You can kind of feel them sitting nicely in those holes, which is really nice. Learning to play on an open hold flute is going to take patience, lots of patience, and you are going to want to take about 10 to 15 steps backwards in terms of the work you're doing. You may want to practice just, single hand first. So maybe you just want to practice on that A, B, and G. Just practicing this hand, getting this hand out of the way, and just kind of sorting these fingers out. You may also then want to just practice on this hand and just sort these fingers out. Things like toughen El Gorbet number 1, great exercise to work with these areas. The other really big thing that's going to help you is to practice without playing. So you're going to sit, rest your flute on your shoulder, and you're just going to sit there and actually watch your fingers and practice tapping those fingers. Number 1, not tense. And number 2, looking at them, making sure they're really covering those holes properly. This is going to go a long way. In an instrument where we cannot see our fingers most of the time, the more work we can do kind of looking at our fingers and kind of getting a pattern in our head of what it looks like and how it feels, the stronger the result is going to be in the end. Like, I feel like we could do research about this and prove this point, but it's really, I've done this with very skeptical students, and every one of them are like, wow, that actually worked. And I'm like, yes, your teacher isn't telling you crazy things. Ugh, why do students not believe teachers? Okay, guys, I would just like to mention that if any of you are considering buying an open hold flute, maybe you're at the stage where you're like, it's time for me to upgrade my instrument, I am really going to recommend, especially if you're in the USA, to phone up the Flute Center of New York. This is such an awesome place. You can phone them up, they give you great advice on instruments, they kind of gauge what you like, what you enjoy, and then they send you flutes. They literally send you a trial of flutes to try out. You can try out a range of them, and if you want to buy one, you keep the flute you want to buy and you send the rest back. So it's so incredibly easy and hassle-free. If you use my promo code PRACTICE, you're going to get a few extra perks as well. You will get an extended trial period, so you'll get 10 days instead of 7 days. You'll get an extended warranty if you decide to buy the instrument, and you'll get free shipping, which is super cool. Now, for those of you who are not in the United States and you're still interested in getting a flute from these guys, you can still use my promo code and you will get free shipping. which is really useful, especially if you're living down south in the middle of nowhere, where we do have some great instruments available to us, but not a huge range of them. All right, everybody, happy practicing. Good luck with those open holes. Pop your comments down below, your questions, whatever it might be, and I will see you next time.